What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Ingersoll, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host.
It's your boy, Mod.
My brother.
What's good, Jay?
Oh, man, it's all good, dude. We're here. We're talking about metal.
Yep.
Had a good interview.
Yes,
so that
we
was
did.
cool.
Yes.
And we're on to part 2 of our day. And we're also on to part 2 of the best albums, our essential albums list of all time.
Yeah, this is another difficult one for me to pick just 5. I'm
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I brought like 15 fucking albums with me, and I'm just narrowing it down to 5, which I feel like, okay, these are probably the most impactful across the genre. So we'll speak to those today, and we'll talk about the others. I even left a few at home. I was like, they were maybe too obscure.
Okay.
Maybe not as like I don't want to go for like the most back pocket band.
Yeah.
Like to like, hey, I know
To
metal.
flex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't need to do that. We're gonna speak to some fairly widely known names today, I'm sure, but for good reason, right? That's why they're widely known because of the catalog. So I brought some albums to show off, and I think these are some of the best albums by these bands and some of the most impactful across the genre.
Yeah, so we have our top 10 albums of all time episode already, where we each picked 5, but our list was very similar. So so just a quick review. You guys should go back and listen to that and explain, but just a quick review in no particular order. Symbolic by Death was picked, Carcass Heartwork, Morbid Angels, Domination, At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul. And for me, it was Soilwork, Chain Heart Machine. That was our only difference. And then you had Rotting Christ, Triarchy of the Lost Lovers, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep, that sounds about right.
So that was kind of, we tried to pick, that would be like more of a top 10, but it ended up being more of like a top 7 because 4 of our albums were the same, you know?
Yeah.
But
And then we're also a bit dated, to be honest.
Yes,
Perfectly
yes.
honest, like showing our age a little bit.
Yeah.
Also, like, kind of like, not the beginning of death metal, but where I would say death metal kind of peaked in the early 90s, where these guys had moved on from grindcore or just straightforward brutal death metal to a much more progressive melodic thrash death, where they were basically putting out peak work. And I think now we're going to move into the 21st century by and large.
Yeah, we're definitely going into the 2000s, and I just wanted to mention that on that, we talked about a few honorable mentions on that, but I wanted to continue this series so we could talk about some other very essential albums that were meant a lot to us in our growth, and that's where I'm approaching this.
Okay.
Like, these albums aren't like top charting albums or whatever it may be. I mean, maybe some of them are, but under the same token, I'm just going through like the next batch of albums that had a major impact on me and my growth as a musician and as an extreme metal listener, right?
Yeah.
So that's where these kind of lists come up with. I do want to say just off of that first list, so like I said, everything comes from 2000 after. The ones I picked today are almost in chronological order because now they just come between 2000 and 2010. I didn't pick anything after that, but that's just how my list goes.
Right.
So there might be, like I said, more episodes to this because we'll keep picking more albums that are impactful. But I did want to do a few honorable mentions in the 90s, 95 through 99 category, just real quick. Nevermore, Dreaming Neon Black, that was an album that was probably one of the better albums of all time for me.
Yeah.
Deicide, Once Upon a Cross had such an impact on me. That was when I first really... you had older Deicide, and everybody loves Legion. Yep. And for me, Legion just never struck a chord with me. I did try to listen to it again the other day, and some of the production sounds a little wonky to me, and I know people just hold that album in a high regard, but for me, it was Once Upon a Cross.
Yeah.
So that fucking grooved. It was satanic. It was in your face. I just loved every second of it. One album that we did talk about on the other episode, but In Flames, the Jester Race, what an impactful album as far as melodic. Like, where is this coming from? You know,
Was that not in my top 5?
No, I don't believe so, because our top 5 are basically the same. I know we talked about that album, but
Man,
because we had a few honorable mentions.
Yeah,
And then
great album.
for me, Cannibal Corpse, The Bleeding.
Yeah.
When I first heard that, I was a little abrasive because I wasn't into that heavy of death metal at the time. But when it started to finally grow on me, and those songs and just everything about that album, crushingly heavy, just
Groove.
good songwriting, good groove. Probably the last thing I liked from Chris Barnes. Well, I can't say that because he had those 2 first 6 feet unders that I did like. But really, that the Bleeding stands out. And Cannibal has put out great music since then as well, but nothing impacted me like the Bleeding. So moving on, let's move on. Let's just start in the 2000s. You know,
I'll throw a couple of
go ahead,
honorable
brother.
mentions.
Yeah,
at you.
please do.
If we're going back to that timeline, I want to mention just a couple albums. One, I'm going to endorse Nevermore's Dreaming Neon Black as an all-time great album. I think for a lot of people, when they're listening to extreme metal, they want the Fry vocal, which you're not going to get out of Nevermore, period. None, zero, no Fry.
Yep.
You're going to get... He's mostly baritone, but he can reach to the skies with the not falsetto, but just he's up there. He can hit some of those King Diamond notes. So I got to endorse that one. That is an all timer for me as well. I find myself still to this day listening to Dreaming Neon Black just here and there. I'll have a song in my head. Poison God Machine. I'll actually probably hit like Lotus Eaters and then let it roll into Poison God Machine. I just love those two songs back to back.
It's a heavy fucking album, dude.
Man, all the way through Poison God Machine. So that's like 8 tracks straight.
Yeah.
At least. Are just bangers.
Yeah.
And then the last 4 or 5, equally good. It's a longer album. It's like an hour long at least. Yeah. And then the very last track, more your ballad type. Very
so good though. Like when I say it's heavy, it's like not only heavy as far as like metal heavy, it's just heavy on the soul. Like just heavy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just weighs on you. Like the emotion in it is so heavy.
Probably one of the more rare metal albums out there where it's very emotionally driven. There's a whole story there, and you can research. Hopefully I'll bring it to the show at some point in time. I got to kind of like get moving on that. We'll speak to Nevermore more in time, but a very emotional album, very heavy, like you said, not just with the riffs, but with the content. But also I had one pulled up here. I got to speak to it. Sadist, A Vision of Misery.
Okay.
Classic. I mean, just such a great thrash metal. I mean, I don't know if I'd call it thrash death metal. It's right there on the cusp. Yeah. Because the vocals are semi-fry.
Yeah.
But it's also more, it almost steers into like more like just like standard thrash metal, like almost Anthrax or Exodus or Overkill, where those vocals aren't too fry vocal. But I remember you showed me that album. You're like, hey, this has got Steve DiGiorgio from Death. You might like this. And yeah, he's a wild bassist already, but that was like his home. He's like sitting in his comfort zone right there in that band. So Sadist, A Vision of Misery. And the last album I wanted to speak to is an honorable mention, just an all-time great for me, Strapping Young Lad City.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I just, man, that album there's no bad tracks on it to me. There's even a cover song on there by Cops Kill Cops. And I absolutely love that song as well. He does more of the clean vocal on that song.
Yeah.
And I think it's Room 429, if I'm not mistaken. But the whole album is just perfect.
It's a fucking banger. Dude.
There's not a bad song on that album. You got Gene Hoglan from Death on the drum kit at a time when he probably was dipping out on the Death because they were going toward like the power metal with Sound of Perseverance, and so he jumped into Strapping Young Lad with City as more of his full-time band. But I think I wanted to just mention those 3 albums as some honorable mentions because, yeah, I couldn't see like ignoring them, but they are kind of older now.
Yeah,
like they're from the 90s.
They're pre-2000.
Yeah, and I think today we're going to focus on things that are at least in the last 25 years of music being made, which is still quite a span of time. So, how do you want to start this thing, Jay?
I'll go. I'll take it first if you don't mind.
No, go ahead. It's your show.
So, well, what's weird is, and I think I mentioned this, but just to reiterate, my picks only start at 2002, and I think my last pick, I just happened to put them in order here. My last pick was 2006, so I really kind of stuck to the very first of the 2000s, just because that's how my mind works a lot in chronological order. So the next time I'll probably start from 2006 and go through 15 or whatever.
That's fair.
But just 5 more albums that were really impactful. I'll take one. We'll just trade back and forth, and we'll speak on it because I know some of them will probably share as well. But for me, in 2002, May 21st, released Kill Switch Engage, Alive or Just Breathing. So it's the second album from Kill Switch Engage. First with Roadrunner Records. That's why it really kind of became, popular in the forefront, because Roadrunner was putting out good shit at that time. And produced by one of my personal heroes, Adam D. He played drums. He's I don't think he played drums on this. There was a drummer. Maybe he did play drums on this, but guitar player. And to me, I just remember where I was at. Yeah.
Producer extraordinaire.
It too. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember where I was at when I heard it. I was in the back of my cousin's car, and we were like going downtown when they used to have like the carnival, and he played this thing and I was just fucking taken back with how badass, how heavy it was. Haven't heard anything as far as like metal goes, because this isn't death metal, but it's still extreme, and it's something like that hit me in the chest like a machine head. The more things change or something like that, which is also a great fucking album.
Right.
But I just remember the artificial harmonics on the guitar, how heavy it was, the double bass, the grooves, the songwriting, and I was just blown back by the clean singing. I was like, man, the heavy and the clean singing, because this is when that really started to become popular, the good clean singing, the metalcore.
Yeah.
Because most of the things we listened to back in the day were all like the extreme metal. There wasn't a lot of clean singing, unless it was a Neon Black, but that's all clean singing, or, Sadist, where it's like thrash clean.
There was hardly any diversity in the vocal department where we were coming from. A lot of metal back in the day was strictly unto its own genre, where now we're at a time it's just genre blending or bending or whatever we're calling it all across the board. Just melding metal into other styles, but also the vocals have come out for a lot of bands to be more diverse. Clean singing, fry singing, all of it. Anything now goes, whatever works, because I think people definitely don't want to listen to 45 minutes of fry vocal in your face. Which isn't to say that I won't. I will for sure. Yeah. But if you're trying to expand your sound, you're trying to be more approachable to other people. If you're trying to make a living on this sort of thing, you might consider like not screaming all day. But some bands, maybe like a Knocked Loose. I don't know. No, they're not. They weren't around in 2006. So like you could just yell all day with that band.
Yeah,
like that's all you're getting.
Yeah,
but riffs
are pissed and whatever.
Riffs are heavy enough to where you're not going to try and sing over any of that stuff. But yeah, I think that now we find ourselves having vocalists that do all of it.
Yeah,
your Devin Townsends and whatnot. They want to sing and scream.
And when I heard this album, I remember that it was one of those things where it was Soilwork was starting to do some clean and heavy vocals. So when I heard this to me like rivaled some Soilwork, and I was so into Soilwork at this time. And Adam did play drums on this, and then he switched to guitar before the tour. So just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah, what a great fucking album. I mean, there's not much more I can say about it. That it completely changed my life, completely opened my eyes to a whole different style of metal, this New England wave of metal and hardcore that kind of, like you said, melded styles, but great singing. There was like some clean singing on some of that early 2000s, like hardcore and metalcore stuff that was coming out.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was kind of off key and a little bit whiny and kind of weird. But this took the melodic, the songwriting and everything all the way to the next level. So for me, my first album on the list, these aren't in no particular order, but my first album, because it came out in 2002, that really changed my life was Killswitch Engage the Lab Just Breathing. Take it or leave it, I guess. I don't know.
No, I have to endorse that. It's a great album for me as well. I remember one of the most impactful things about the album to me was the lyrical content. At a time when, so you're saying what, 2002?
Yeah.
Like, so, I'm going back and I'm looking at my life at that time, and man, I really needed to not have such ominous lyrical content in my life. I really wanted a little bit more vulnerability and emotional honesty and a sense of purpose, if you will, than either being fantasy or just full of anger and hate. That's something that really stuck out to me. I could I can listen to heavy music, but I can also have like a positive feeling about it. I can have a positive message received. I can agree with somebody. Somebody like Jesse is out here just saying these things, and I love just following him on Instagram.
Yeah.
As a side note, like following him on Instagram is awesome because he's such a mental health advocate and he's such a genuine good person. Just with what he's saying day in and day out, whenever he's putting a reel or a story on, I'm like, oh, here we go with the pep talk,
and he's positive.
And somebody I can receive very well because he's just, for lack of a better term, but apt, he's a real dude.
Yeah.
He's just real. He keeps it real, raw, and honest.
Yep.
And there are not enough people like Jesse out there who can, address the things that he does and the way that he does. So that's the one thing that stuck out to me. And also just that it was heavy. It's just, like, that's all. That's what we're here to talk about first and foremost, is how heavy the music is and how good it is. And they wrote songs, so there's good song structure there. They were innovative in ways. I know the last track, I think it's Numbered Day, or is it Numbered Days? I'm not sure if it's the first or the last track, but the last track, I know that they do that slight tempo progression.
Yeah.
And it builds up, and I just love that. It's not the most original thing, but there's just not enough of that's effectively done.
Right.
And so that track alone stands out to me. The first track, the opening track on that album, is awesome. And you'll have to forgive me for getting names off the top of my head, but I do know that it had the single on it, the more ballad style, if you will. It was more of a, I'm forgetting all the song names, but it's been a minute since I've listened to it. But I absolutely love that album front to back, and I got to endorse it and say cheers to that because it takes me back. I'm glad that we got to see them with Anthrax. That was
for sure.
That was definitely a bucket list band for me.
I right before we move on to yours, I do also want to say that this isn't probably even my favorite Killswitch album.
Sure.
It's just the one that impacted me the most.
Yeah.
Because they came out with great material after that as well.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to put that out there that I love the album, but it's not my favorite. But my favorite Killswitch is one that most people isn't their favorite. So
that's all right.
But
fuck
yeah,
them.
go ahead. Tell me what you got.
So for me, and this isn't, all of these albums that I have, like almost all of these albums are not the first albums that I heard by these bands.
Okay.
Nearly. 4 out of 5 of these that I'm going to speak to today, not the first album or song that I heard. But the first band that I will speak to on my list is Lamb of God, Ashes of the Wake.
Okay.
I think these guys are kings. They've been doing it for a while. They stand the test of time for a good reason. They're great musicians and they write great songs. I first got turned on to this band, I want to say it was like a Headbangers Ball compilation, and they had Laid to Rest from Palaces Burn, As the Palaces Burn.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that is the best song on that whole compilation. And I immediately became a Lamb of God fan. I bought that album, and it's just chock full of bangers.
Bangers, dude.
Just front to back, maybe possibly only what I would call one single filler track on there, and that's not even a bad track. It's not like I got to jump to hit the skip button on it.
Right.
But when they came out with Ashes of the Wake, I think they were in full stride. And there's not a bad track. There's not one filler track on this album at all, period. And they're all like 5 stars, period. Like the instrumentals, every song. This is an album that I think could appeal to like non-metalheads. Maybe you'd have to be like a hard rock fan or something of this nature.
Yeah.
You'd have to be willing to at least enjoy guitars.
Right, yeah.
But I think they did so many things right on Ashes of the Wake that they branched out their whole fan base with it. Everybody liked Lamb of God suddenly. I thought I only liked Lamb of God, like in my small little world, like, hey, you guys ever heard of Lamb of God? And then Ashes of the Wake comes out, fucking everybody likes them.
Yeah.
And I think probably their best work still. I mean, people might say Wrath, people might say Palaces. Some OGs might even say New American Gospel.
Yeah.
Like that's it for them.
Right.
But for me, just with the songwriting, the production, even some of the vocal stylings, maybe a little bit more. I think this is Randy, like peak Randy, in my opinion, because he had that dirty Fry vocal that he was known for from the first 2 albums. If we're not counting Burn the Priest material, just the prior to Lamb of God albums, to now there's like discernible, audible vocals that you can like decipher words and language.
Yes.
Like better than the previous 2. And it's still just dirty enough to where you can appreciate the Fry vocal. So for me, and I'm not even saying like this is the best album that I'm going to talk about today. I basically hold these all in equal regard. But I listened to the shit out of this album. I remember just sitting down in my buddy's basement, bringing it over, not doing anything. He's like, oh, I see you brought some CDs. And I was like, well, if we don't have any plans. He's like, well, what do you want to listen to? I was like, well, I just can't get enough of this Lamb of God. And the guy's not really a big metalhead. He's more of like an indie rocker. But I just remember we sat there and we listened to it and we didn't really talk over it or have any conversation. And at the end of it, he was just like, that was actually really good, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I dig that. That was honestly awesome. Mark Morton with the solos. I mean, you had Chris Adler on the kit then.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for me, it's going to be my favorite in their catalog. And even though they had prior work, I think it's the one that was the most impactful on metal and it made metal music more accessible and maintained heaviness, like stout, dense heaviness.
Yes.
Like there's no there's
no
not
clean vocals.
There's no clean vocals,
Yeah.
but and there's not a ballad on there. There's
Right.
not like a soft, like there's an instrumental. It's on the dark side. It's definitely minor, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that one out there, and I'm gonna stick with your theme of just going chronological, so that I'm not like seemingly displaying bias toward any one album or the other. We're gonna basically move in a timeline here, and I think that one was 2002,
2004.
2004. So
August
I
31st,
might be
2004.
slightly out of chronological order now in my mind, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, for me, Ashes of the Wake, this probably could have made my list too. It was just I just wanted to pick the first 5 that came to mind,
Sure.
because if not, I could still be thinking about it, and we wouldn't even be recording this episode, because
Right.
that's just how music is. But this album too, I remember listening to the shit out of this album.
Yeah.
Turned me on to Lamb of God. I do like As the Palaces Burn. I think it's a great album too. But I started here. This is where I got exposed to, and it was the same thing. My laser burned the shit out of this CD because I just constantly listened to it all the time. Like you said, good songwriting, so that's what appealed to me.
Yep.
And then the vocals were audible but yet really heavy, so that always makes a difference too when you can understand what they're saying, because then that can appeal to more people as well.
Yeah.
Because if you're just sitting there doing the toilet bowl, no one knows what you're saying, and it's not catchy, So
And also, to me, like, I understand that works for some albums and some bands, vocals that you can't understand a fucking word. But if you got something to say, like you might want, like, you can be a fry vocalist, you can be a screamer, but this could be like a clinic or a case study on how to do the fry vocal in a way that people can understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of the album for me too, is you can hear what Randy has to say, and he's worth listening to, in my opinion. I like him as a human being. I watched an interview with him yesterday. The guy's not even a metalhead. Like, coming up, he's into punk. Whether or not people know that about him or not, but he's into Bad Brains and just punk music in general. So for him to find himself in a metal band, he's like, no, I'm not a Megadeth fan. Slayer, take him or leave him. This guy didn't even come up on metal, but he finds himself in one of the world's current largest metal bands. Yeah. And I think the vocal audibility on that album is a big part of why that album is so impactful on metal. Just being able to do dirty vocals that people can sing back to you is probably kind of rare, Well, most times people are just being screamed at. They're like, I have no idea what the guy's saying. So
exactly. But what a killer album, Ashes of the Wake.
Yeah.
For me, it filled the void, and people might throw their phones or laptops if they're watching, or kick their TV over if they're watching this. But to me, it was almost like, I found the replacement for Pantera that I needed. That's kind of where, just the attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like they sound like Pantera, but it was like that accessible kind of heavy metal punch in the fucking gut that you needed, but it was still almost, dare I say, corporate or popular, right? Because a lot of people liked Lamb of God because of this album, and they got into Lamb of God, but to me, they just filled that hole that Pantera had left in my heart, where heavy as shit, but they could still play a stadium type thing, Yeah,
and I didn't even think of making that comparison, but I think I have made it in the past, and looking at their timeline, it kind of coincides with the end of Pantera, basically, and then you have Lamb of God pick up where they left off in ways, but definitely a band for Pantera fans for sure. I think if you like one, you should like the other, and if you don't, that's curious to me, but also that's you, not me. That's your personal taste. But Lamb of God, definitely for Pantera fans, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, Mark Morton, not Dimebag, but still an awesome guitarist. He's got that classical, almost like your Jimmy Page type classic skill set.
Yeah,
shines through. He's not like a technical player. I mean, I'm not saying he's not technical necessarily, but some guys, they just shred, and it just sounds like a math equation going off.
Yeah.
But I feel like Mark Morton's got soul in his playing. If I'm to be loose with the term, but there's a lot more feeling going on in his playing, just with the bends and the dives. I really feel like he's giving me real
not
music.
just running scales and shit. Exactly.
That's another part of what makes their band special and comparable to Pantera, if you will. What do you got next on your list?
So next, this might be kind of one that's a little off the wall for some people. This band might be one of the little more obscure ones in a way. You might have to be an extreme metalhead to kind of know these guys. But for me, this album was released on February 10th, 2004. So for me, this album is Into Eternity, Buried in Oblivion.
Oh.
So I don't know how this even came across. I'm usually not into the higher vocals unless it's like a Nevermore. I kind of started to work my way up in this world.
Mm-hmm.
But these guys are kind of parallel to that Nevermore where it's like but these guys are even heavier because they have the fry vocals too and the death metal vocals, and they grind. So there's like a lot of death metal mixed with like power metal.
Mm-hmm.
But this album right here just floored me when I heard it because of the musicianship, because of the songwriting, because of how heavy and in your face it was.
Yeah.
You know, they're from Canada, so it tracks with the progressive death metal or whatever, you know. But they were formed in 1997 by Tim Roth, Scott Krall, and Jim Austin. What a great fucking record this was. I remember specifically listening to this record one time when I was under the influence of psilocybin mushrooms, and it totally just changed my life completely. I was like, my goodness, is this thing insanely badass. So, you know, I don't really know what else to say about this except you're going to get something a little different than probably what you expect. And I think that's why I love this album so much, because it wasn't just straight death metal, but there were parts in there to make a death metal lover love it.
Yeah.
And then the melodicism and the technicality blended hand in hand. Like, these guys know what the hell they're doing, and the drums on there, the technicality of it. But they also wrote good songs because there was hooks and choruses. So it was like just the way they melded all of those things that are very hard sometimes to meld and come across. Like you're saying about the guitar players, dude's not just running scales.
Right.
Like, he's playing memorable solos that I can remember after I shut the CD off. You know, they're singing hooks. And then, like I said, the high vocals sometimes are take it or leave it for me, but there's just something about the vocal diversity and attack on this album that really stands out. So, man, Into Eternity, they got some other great albums too, but Buried in Oblivion, that's the one that just kind of like shook me to the core, and one just I could not turn off.
I'm looking up, I want to make sure I use the right name here. Let me go to their Bandcamp or their Wikipedia real quick. So I think it's Tim Roth.
Yeah, he's the main guy. He's the guy that is the guitars, leads, and vocals.
Okay.
He's the guy that, kind of started the band, and he's the one that's kind of kept it together.
I'm wondering, I want to make sure he is the one, though, if it was him and not Stu Block, the graduate of the Yngwie Malmsteen School for Guitarists.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I think Stu's just a vocalist.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't go back to the page. Anyway, so to be that melodic and, like coming from such a technical background and still be writing memorable solos is a testament to his actual, like, songwriting and musical prowess, because you can be a technical musician all day, and then a lot of that stuff can get lost on the average listener. But there's just such a great sense of melody that doesn't feel like, again, a math equation going off on the fretboard here. Just such a great album, though, that album. I remember when you first showed it to me, too, and sometimes stuff can just be too technical for me.
Yeah.
I can just be like, I can't get into this, and which is funny, extreme metal podcast, but I don't know, sometimes it's just the song maybe not catchy enough and it's just too much going on. But I remember hearing that, and I was like, between them opening it up with just a simple chord progression and a melody over that, there was a lot of production in the keyboard department. I don't know if there's a full-time keyboardist, but there was plenty going on there with keyboards and piano and whatnot. Clean vocals, fry vocals. Just you saying that, I mean, I know I have that album, I know it exists in my house, and it's got to be on one of the 2 CD racks that I have there, but it makes me want to go back and listen to it, like, today, like, put it on and revisit it, because it's a little older now.
Yeah.
And I miss like that album for sure. But yeah, you're taking me back thinking about it right now. And what a good, like, when you say power metal, it's almost like, no thanks, I don't wanna.
Yeah, because power metal can be kind of happy, and there's not a lot of that here. I'm just more talking about vocal style, more or less, because this is a pretty fucking angry effort.
I think the only, like, power metal parts to it would come into play, like, on the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not, like, super happy choruses. They're just big.
Yeah.
They're just like, and here we're going to open it up and strip down the music for the sake of the vocals to stand out. But, man, as I remember, that was just an album that I listen to a lot too. Like the CD, the jewel case took a beating because I take it with me everywhere in the car and bring it to a friend's house or take it to work, And yeah, definitely one that I have you saying that makes me want to revisit that. Good call on that one. That is, I think, like some of the people we've had on the show, the more technical bands and musicians, if you haven't heard this album, you might want to check that out because I think it's going to be up a few of your alleys. A few of the musicians we've had, they might really appreciate this one if they haven't heard it yet. I mean, there's other tech death metal that's come about since.
Yes.
But I think these guys are, they're because of the fact that they precede other bands currently doing this, you can kind of see where your current favorites come from in that tech progressive metal department. Your Peripheries, your Polyphias, no vocals there, but Into Eternity, good call, man. Absolutely love it.
And like I said, that it's not probably as I'm looking at these bands that you have on the table and some of the other ones I'm about to speak to. It's not a household name, but I just think it's one of those bands that kind of people should know more about, even though, the last thing they put out was in 2018. And I know along the way they've kind of had a scattered past, but I mean, even the name itself, Into Eternity, and then 2001, Dead or Dreaming, and then Buried in Oblivion. It's just like, just take that in. It's like just a lot to think about with the names itself. Obviously we're talking about death here, but what a cool way to come up with another way to say that or think about that existential angst that we all have. Just fucking cool, man. So that was my next one, brother.
No, I absolutely dig it, and I thank you for that because that's a trip down memory lane I can't wait to walk down later today if I have the time. I see now how I got these confused. Even though I double checked last night, I still line these up out of order. The next one I want to speak to, this is the first album I heard by this band, and I just remember thinking, there's not much like this. And I know you love this band, but when I first heard The Silent Circus by Between the Buried and Me, I thought I was onto something that has not been done yet. There was, to me, I'm hard pressed to think that there was something that progressive and that heavy combined. Like you had your progressive, like Dream Theater, and then you had your heavy, like Death or Carcass or even Lamb of God. But I never really saw those two worlds really come together where, these are not verse chorus bridge, verse chorus songs, intro outro. They're just progressive pieces that barely bring anything back at all. One of my favorite tracks on the album, Aesthetic, it has that one crushing breakdown riff that they play like twice in the song, and it's just a steamroller. But the whole album is good.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a controlled chaos to this album. There's the one track, I can't even pronounce the name of it, a Digglemut or something of this nature, and that's like the most chaotic song maybe on the album, but it's got like that beautiful sing-song chorus part. Mm-hmm. Like it goes from that chaos and that grind and that, that trim picking into something like just the opposite. Like we're capable of beauty, is the lyric in that song, I think. And it's what an awesome lyric for the moment. It's like, you are capable of beauty, clearly. Like, like this is it. And I just think it's such a great album, start to finish. It's another one of those albums where I say, like, you just press play on track one and let it ride. Whether you're lifting weights, running, walking the dog, driving from city to city, they put out a boatload of great music after this album. This is actually kind of like a more raw effort, if you will. And they went on to maybe even better albums, if you will. But for me, because of the timestamp on it, 2003, we got a Victory Records release here. Just a pivotal album for the metal community, in my opinion. There was some clean singing on it, not like standout awesome clean singing, but it wasn't offensive. It was borderline. Like when you talk about some of the metalcore or hardcore metalcore albums that were coming out at that time, and the singing was a little off key. This is almost that. But I think as a vocalist, their vocalist, he got a lot better over time.
Yeah, and then the drummer did a lot of the clean singing on this effort, though, too.
Okay.
And the first one.
All right.
It wasn't until Alaska, which we'll speak about in a minute. Spoiler alert.
Fucking great album, too. Tommy.
changed things. But yeah, dude, for me too, I don't know. I remember Luke showed me the self-titled, which was the first one. He's like, you really like these fucking guys. And I really like these fucking guys. And at that time I was like, oh, the technical, the more progressive, the better. I know we talk a lot about songwriting and riff soup on the show about how it's one of the things that only some bands do well. Well, Between the Beard and Me do it very well.
Yep.
But I just listened. I've been going through their catalog, and it's a lot to take in. It's hard to listen to more than one Between the Buried and Me album in one day.
Yeah.
But I've been going through their back catalog, listening to all of their material, and I'm about halfway through, maybe a little over half, and it's all great music. It all stands out. There are things where you listen to the album a couple times and it will stick in your head because it's just that good. You know, these guys are top tier musicians. This is music for musicians or music for people that have a huge brain capacity in order to take this all in.
Yeah.
And this album itself was, even on Alaska as well, before they really started getting progressive and started mixing other genres in, because this is a metal album with like some softer parts but they don't do like the colors thing where they bust into jazz and bluegrass and all that. Like they don't get that quirky yet, you know. But fucking great album. I love it as well.
Yeah, it's metal front to back with some rock themes to it here and there. Like they're not onto like colors or what came after, even after Great
Misdirect,
and then after that they did the two.
Yeah, the Parallax 1 and 2.
Yep, which I own. I don't own the Great Misdirect, unfortunately. Don't ask me why. Fucking great album from what I listened to. But Parallax 1 and 2, I think it was fucking great. That's when you start to see more of the genres infused into their work, like the Circus sounds and just the randomness,
the quirkiness, and really getting Bungle inspired. I feel like, and a lot of that came after they did that album, and then along the line, it was when they did that covers album, and then they got Blake and Dusty in the band, and then they just grew immensely, and then realized they can do all these Queen vocals and Mike Patton vocals, and then all of a sudden their band kind of completely progressed after they put out that covers album. To me, like all these things that they probably realized, oh, we're this good now that we can do all these type of things, you know.
Actually, Automata 1 and 2 are the two albums that I also really enjoy.
Those are almost kind of newer, actually.
Yeah. So they definitely been doing a lot more progressive and genre bending styles as time progressed. But this, to me, a staple for the metal community. It just fucking crushingly heavy.
And almost a testament to like do what you want to do type thing too. Don't do what everybody else is doing. And if you do it well and you continue to do it, they're selling out fucking places all over, you know. So they've made a career out of it, and fucking kudos to them for being as good as they are, you know.
I think it's also a testament to having like full buy-in in the belief that you're doing what you're supposed to, what you're meant to be doing. I think all of the members of that band, like you got to have a lot of buy-in in that band, because they write some long ass songs, 10, 12, 14-minute long songs. And for me, it's always going to be like the Riddler, just made of questions. How do you do it? How do you write that song that long and have everybody else on, like, for the whole thing front to back? So just a testament to the musicianship as well, and having the buy-in and the belief that you're doing what you're meant to be doing. So it began for me with the Silent Circus. Just a great album.
Cool. All right, so my next album is actually cousins to Between the Buried and Me, and it's The Glass Casket We Are Gathered Here Today, released July 13th, 2004. So if you guys want some more insight, go watch our Adam Cody episode that we interviewed him, and it was a great conversation, and hopefully we'll have him on and we can talk a little bit more. But we did kind of talk about this, and you can really get some insight into the album. But I went to, and I told this story on that pod, so excuse me, but I'll just say it again. I went with Luke, who was a guest on our show before, and we went to like wherever they had in the mall at FYE maybe at the time. I'm not real sure.
Hot Topic, FYE Spencer's.
Yeah, something. And he was like, get these two albums. And it was Black Dahlia Murder Unhallowed, which was a great fucking album. And it was this Glass Casket album. And I'd never heard Glass Casket. I didn't know anything about him, but I just remember when I put it on, what a great fucking mix of like mixing hardcore and death metal, but not deathcore, right? It's just like, it's pummeling, it's heavy as fuck, it's everything I want. It's also emotionally heavy. There are parts of it that are just like, man, that really strikes a chord, because they might just come off some of that heaviness for just a long enough for you to feel this emotion coming through. And I mean, a lot of that's on Adam and what he spoke about.
Yeah.
So go listen to that episode. But yeah, there's not enough good things I can say about this album, but this also had, Dusty, who joined Between the Buried and Me. So Dusty Waring on guitars, he joined the Between the Buried and Me, and Blake Richardson, they both joined Between the Buried and Me after the Silent Circus.
Okay.
So, yeah, I just a great fucking heavy in your face album, and for me it was another one of the albums that I loved on Hollowed. I love Black Dahlia. I still do.
Yep.
But on that day, this Glass Casket spoke to me, and it was everything I needed in heavy at that time. Just fucking riffy, in your face, raw, like fucking gut punching sweet. So that's my next pick.
I remember you showing
impact on myself.
Yeah, I remember you showing me that, and especially the last track on the album standing out to me, where they actually like go to the clean vocals. And I remember having a copy of it and being at just a fucking random house party, and nobody was really like paying attention to the music, so I just took it over, and like Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, I slide the disc in, and I had it at a modest volume, and somebody came over and like, what is this? I'm like, band's called Glass Casket. No opinion on it, but they didn't make me turn it off, and I just remember like being able to like, I felt like, oh, the kids are liking metal again, because it felt like for a time people could not enjoy metal at all. But yeah, a good enough album to where people would be able to just randomly listen to it and enjoy like the heaviness. I think it's like the catchiness of it, the songwriting. It wasn't like Cryptopsy crazy, obviously. Like it's a different genre than that. Like you can't just put on Cryptopsy unless you're really into that style of music.
Yes.
But this had songwriting, groove, and just a pop sensibility, or a catchiness to it anyway, that people could appreciate. So yeah, good call on Glass Casket, and it definitely, mates with the boys from Between the Buried and Me for sure. They share some members there. So yeah, I just really love what they last put out, that little EP.
Oh yeah,
still
right killing it, man.
That right there for me. So yeah, with that, I will segue into my next choice. Now, this is not the first album I heard by this band, and I have these way out of order chronologically. I'm actually going back in time the whole way here. But Meshuggah with Nothing. I remember when I got turned on to Meshuggah, it was just kind of random. I had Chaos Sphere, and an appropriate title for that album, because really hard to take in, even today, as a Meshuggah fan. Not my favorite Meshuggah album, but I loved it at the time. Got about 2 or 3 good songs on it that are just bangers, and I remember wanting to see them live immediately just based on that album, and I did. I saw them with Tool in 2001.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's all they
2001, holy shit.
Yeah, right after 9/11, 2 days later. Like it was supposed to be on 9/11. I was supposed to see Tool and Meshuggah at the Van Andel, but 9/11 happened, and then they postponed it, and thankfully did the show 2 days later.
Yeah, no shit.
And so I did get to see Meshuggah at the Van with Tool. And I think that was because Danny Carey is such a fan of their drummer.
Yes.
Is it Thomas Hake? I believe. But Nothing was when they put out Rational Gaze, and it kind of had like that Matrix video looking, like they're all bending. Everything's like the cover art you see here, all green and black. And that was different because the chaos from Chaos Sphere was what I had come to expect. But then Rational Gaze was a song that had a beat and not all of this tricky drum work that didn't really make enough sense to groove and bob your head to. And I thought, what a weird turn for these guys. But nope, there's still Meshuggah. It's still very gent on this album front to back. But it just has enough tracks on it that stand out to me. The first one, Strenga, then you got Rational Gaze, then Spasms toward the end. I just love the whole album. I'd put it on, and like definitely during the pandemic, I'd revisit this bad boy, and I just run around in my my MMO RPG Guild Wars 2, and I just like do whatever random gaming needed to be done. But I just love that album. I think it's may or may not be Meshuggah fans' favorite album, but I think it's one of the more breakout albums in their career. It's coming after Chaosphere. I think it's the very next thing, maybe an EP in between, but I think Rational Gaze really helped put them on the map and propelled their name to the next level. And I think the gent thing really started to happen because of Meshuggah and because of this album. I think they really capitalized on the success of one, the Tool album, or excuse me, the Tool tour.
Yeah.
And then Chaosphere, like going into nothing and any work that there was in between. I think they were really dialed in again. They were finding their stride with nothing, and to me, I could still put this on as if it were the newest Meshuggah album and treat it as such and still enjoy it. It's just a great album. Jay, you maybe not the biggest Meshuggah fan, take him or leave him, but
yeah, for me, I don't have a lot to speak on Meshuggah in general. I had the Chaosphere album. I remember when I think you turned me on to him. And it was just kind of one of those things where it just kind of all blended together, and nothing against Meshuggah. Like, I probably have to go back and revisit more of it, and I should spend more time with it. I should just go through their discography. But I think some of that, the problem is sometimes, and I've said this before on the show too, like when shit starts to get real popular, that's when I'll like purposely not get into it. So I think maybe that's why they flew under the radar, because every band, like, don't get me wrong, I hold them on the highest regard. I feel like them and Candiria are the ones that kind of put fucking gent in the forefront, and people wanted to be gent, because if you listen to older Candiria, which was like around this time, because this was 2002.
Yep.
Chaosphere was in 1998, so around there is when Candiria was doing it too. They had the jazz and rap kind of influence a little bit, but they also had all them weird ass patterns with the kicks and shit. So when you create a whole genre basically, and there's a bunch of wannabe bands after it, it's kind of like a Tool, where it's like you made a whole genre because of the type of music you decided to create. Maybe there was somebody before these guys, but nobody we never heard of. I mean, as far as what they're doing. So hold them on the highest regard. I think for me, I don't want to say I do or don't, I love them or I dislike them. I just probably need to spend a little more time. And I own Chaosphere, I own Catch 33 and Obzen. Them are all ones that I bought, but I just feel like I probably just onced over them and it just didn't catch me like it probably should. So,
and again, Meshuggah's the type of band, especially in a 60-minute setting, where you can probably hear enough of it halfway through the album because it can be a bit much to take in. I definitely love it for like music, like almost, I don't want to sound disrespectful when I say it, but like a background music or music to help motivate me do what I'm doing. If it's mowing the lawn, if it's lifting weights, if it's driving, I love Meshuggah for that sort of thing. But I will also say that Chaosphere probably not the best production quality. So if you're revisiting, I would probably pick up at something after the fact. And they've got a lot of good work. Even Immutable, the newest one that came out a year or two back, whatever it was, 2022 or 2022.
I will. I think maybe I'll pick up Nothing this week and check it out, because I'm mixing in new albums to add to the end of the year list, but I'm also revisiting, like I said, I'm going through the BTBAM catalog. I'm going through some of the stuff that we talked about, like on some of the other episodes. Like, it gets me back into like motivated to listen to. I'll probably go back and listen to the Into Eternity again, because it's been a while.
I know that I liked Immutable based on one of the I think it was the first single that they put out, and the first time I heard it, it had such a catchy beat. I thought, man, I could see my wife dancing to this with me, like in a very romantic way, if you will. I loved the beat so much. I was like, I bought tickets to see Meshuggah last year, and I told Amy, like, you're going to see Meshuggah, babe. Like, we're going.
Yeah.
And most of it was because I wanted to listen to that. I just told her, I was like, if you listen to the guitars, you'll get lost. Like, there's just too much going on there.
Yeah.
It's hard to listen to, but if you listen to the drummer in the pocket, which he normally is, it'll make more sense. Like, the snare will be on 3, and you can kind of like expect to groove to it, and then you just kind of let the guitars happen to you. And that's the way I like to explain Meshuggah to people, is dial in on the drums first, and then kind of understand what the guitars are doing. And he's an amazing drummer, period, but just the way he's able to like utilize almost a standard in the pocket beat over such complicated rhythms from the guitars.
And then be playing that complicated rhythm on the kick while he's, they're phenomenal musicians for sure. So, all right, cool. So my next album is actually kind of funny because it's another BTBAM album, Alaska. This came out September 6, 2005. Now, I was already privy to Between the Buried and Me. I already was jamming that album all the time. Sure. I had the covers album. I believe the covers album came out before Alaska.
They were close. I want to say afterwards, to be honest with you, because I know I had Alaska already.
Okay. Yep. So that tracks. But I was already a big fan of BTBAM. But when they added, like I said, when they added Dusty and they added Blake, all of a sudden something happened to this band where it even went further than what the Silent Circus offered.
Yeah.
I mean, the Silent Circus, most of it's pummeling in your face, some cool, clean vocals.
Mm-hmm.
You come to Alaska, and all of a sudden we have like you have all the same things that Silent Circus added, but it was just like this sheen and this polish, and some of the, although technical, they did bring some things back, but they were just like, it would, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like it, like just fucking. It was really catchy and technical at the same time. It just made you want to go back and like listen to it again and again. And Alaska to me changed a lot, and it made me become a huge BTBAM fan. I remember riding in a car, and I was with this dude, and he played drums, and we're on the way to see Victor Wooten and his cousin. And because his cousin was playing drums in Victor Wooten, and I played it for him, and he wasn't even into metal or anything, but I was like, you got to listen to what's going on here. This is some of the most technical, cool, crazy stuff, because even the technicality even got further beyond what Silent Circus was actually doing when you added Blake into the band, because his drumming is just freaking phenomenal, man. So yeah, I don't know. This is an album I'll still put on all the time. I just love this album all the way. It's probably one of my favorite BTBAMs. I really am a big fan of Colors, the new Colors too, and the Great Misdirect. But Alaska just did a lot for me, and you could say all the same things that we kind of said on Silent Circus, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But I just felt like it was more of a sheen and clean version of like what they were to offer in the future, and it was kind of the stepping stool for them to even hit another level beyond what they were already displaying on Silent Circus.
Yeah. So for me, Alaska it's actually a very unique album in their catalog, in my opinion, because even though you've got some longer songs on it, it felt like it was more a collection of really good songs and not necessarily a theme album or a, like, it didn't feel like as much of a, I mean, yeah, it just felt like they wrote really good individual songs, and it wasn't like an album that start to finish was supposed to flow like telling you a story.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a concept album.
Right.
Like their albums almost have like a concept album feel to them, or a really like Colors feels like a concept album to me, and maybe it is. I don't know if they call it that or not, but I feel like it's a really unique one because it's just song after song after song of great songs, and it was a real step forward for them in a way. Like, production was better. I think vocals were better. Everything on it, it was less chaotic than Silent Circus.
Oh yeah,
and I loved it as well because it's still very progressive. It's not exactly like, again, it's not a predictable songwriting structure, but they had all kinds of callbacks. They had choruses, but then they'd have little parts in between that they didn't have before. So maybe a one-time off riff. But Alaska definitely gave them the staying power, so you could count on like a Colors coming your way.
Yes.
Or you could count on them having a career, because any band possibly can put out a great album and then disappear. Tragedy strikes, band member changes, it doesn't work out, label drops you, not enough tickets sold, not enough money to get on a tour. But Alaska, I think, gave Between the Buried and Me staying power, and for good reason. Still a great album. I just caught Selke's The Endless Obsession on satellite the other day in the car.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I thought to myself,
sweet.
here it is, we're 19 years removed from it, and it's still getting love on the satellite. So just randomly, Like, I don't even know how they figure it into the algorithm. Normally, a radio station or a satellite, they're going to focus on newer stuff. But occasionally, an older one gets slipped in there. And, I mean, yeah, they'll throw it back to a death track here and there, which is fucking cool to me.
Yeah.
I saw a Carcass embodiment come on the other day.
Nice.
I just silenced everything. Like, my wife and I are having a conversation. I was just like, come back. 5 minutes, we'll come back to that. But yeah, like that album still gets love, and for good reason. It's a great one. I think it's a good 1-2 punch from that band, one album to the next. Like, and they never really let off. You can say that you like other albums by them better than like their previous work or their later work, whatever. But for them to like. And then moving on to Colors too, like they didn't really let off there either. They just got better with that one, just longer songs probably. But yeah, Between the Buried and Me, huge impact on metal, and for good reason. Fucking top tier musicians, and they are capable of writing an album chock full of bangers like Alaska, or they're capable of writing like basically a theme or concept album like Colors or The Great Misdirect. I feel like these albums all have. Well, Great Misdirect was almost more like Alaska, where I don't know if it was as conceptual in my mind as, say, like the Silent Circus and or Colors, but man, yeah, good call.
Yeah, that was the one that just kind of springboarded my love. Like I liked them before, but when I heard that, I was just like, and it was another so impactful on me that I just spun it all the time too. I just listened to it over and over and over.
I think vocals got better too.
Oh yeah, vocals did get better.
They
the
got
clean singing, but they were starting to come into her own. So this did come out in it says September 6, 2005.
Yep.
And then the Anatomy of covers came out in June 13, 2006. So really just 1 year turnaround, and they did those covers. Then that's where you get this super huge leap when you get into Colors, and then they're starting off with the acoustic guitar and like the almost folky weird piano and all this stuff, and you're like, whoa, what the fuck, what's going on here? Like,
I could see people like not liking that because again, they take another leap with Colors that is very progressive. So I could see people like dipping out at that point. But for me, I actually surprised myself by liking it. I was like, man, you got 12-minute long songs on here easily, and I don't mind it at all.
Yeah.
I'll listen to it. I was driving from Kalamazoo to Portage to work, and I would listen to half of the album one way, and then the other half of the album on the way back home. And I just remember not getting tired of it. So, and that's not even the album that we're talking about, but that's just a testament to how good Between the Buried and Me is.
Yeah, I always say if I was stranded on a desert island, I'd want a BTBAM record because I could listen to it over and over and over and probably still hear something new.
Yeah.
Or I could get a bunch of different genres out of one thing, you know, like because
sense.
they just put so much music forth, you know, and their fortitude of how they do it. I'm just like, Jesus, man, I don't know how you do it, but keep doing it. One of the best bands to do almost a soup out there, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck, it's top tier soup. Bro.
Yeah, chef's kiss. I'll go for the BTBAM soup every day. It's on the menu.
Sure. All right, man. What you got?
So next we're gonna kick it overseas to one of my favorite bands in life. Not the first album, not the second album I heard by these guys, but probably End of Day. Looking back on it, one of my favorites by these guys, and the band is Gojira, and the album is L'Enfant Sauvage. So had to work on my French, and even even dialed up the YouTube to hear them pronounce it because my pronunciation of it was pretty shoddy. So this is, man, like I love From Mars to Sirius. That's my introduction to the band.
Okay.
They have 2 prior albums to that. When I caught wind of From Mars to Sirius, I was immediately won over. Like my instant favorite band. I thought Joe's vocals sounded very similar to Chuck's. Something about it. They weren't like he hits a lower register, but when he hit some of those highs, I thought, man, that kind of reminds me of Chuck. And he also plays guitar.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a lead guitarist like Chuck, but I was just immediately captivated by them. And then to find out his brother Mario played the drums, I thought, oh, here we go. We've got a brother connection in the band that's usually a pretty strong band.
Yeah.
And they haven't changed the lineup at all, to my knowledge, one member over the course of time. But this is an album, again, and I like to say this when it's a good album, not a bad song on the album. I don't find myself skipping it. Now, they had some popular songs on it. This is when they started to really peak in popularity.
Yeah.
Like they were good, and then they were really pretty good. Like I saw them on the Way of All Flesh tour, like 08, 09.
Yeah.
I actually was queued up, face in front of the monitor to like buy tickets as soon as they went on sale. It's kind of like the early day when we moved forward from standing in line to buy tickets to where you could like buy them online.
Yeah.
So I had that all set up. The computer was booted up. Page was refreshed. And to the minute, I was like typing on the keyboard, wanting to buy. So I actually won. Not only did I buy tickets, but I won meet and greet passes. So I actually got to kick it with them for like 5 or 10 minutes, whatever, before the show, and talk with them. And that was at a small hall show, like comparable to an FOE around town, like a Fraternity of Eagles type size.
Yeah.
The venue, you'd walk in, you'd go up a rickety wooden staircase. This is some neighborhood in Chicago. I couldn't even tell you where. I don't even know. It wasn't downtown. I had to take the L to get there, and I felt like, where are we going?
Yeah.
But so I walk, it's like a little vegan restaurant downstairs, and then you walk up this shoddy little wooden staircase, and then it opens up to a nice big hall. And I got to see Car Bomb play, and I got to meet Gojira, and probably the loudest concert I've ever been to.
Yeah.
Like they were just too loud for that little hall room.
Yeah.
It's just like it's the only time I've ever like just begged for earplugs. Please, God, I need them now. And somebody gave me some. He's like, hey man, like, 'cause I was like holding my ears with my fingers. It was just unenjoyably loud. And then this guy gave me some, and to be perfectly honest, those earplugs, they must have been made out of concrete because they hurt. I put them in. They like the twist blue with the red wire on them. And
those ones.
They hurt.
Bitch, dude.
Yeah, they hurt.
Them fuckers hurt.
And I felt bad because I put them in my ears, and I did like one song maybe, and I couldn't, and I just took them out, and I like was wearing them around my neck or put them in my pocket, and I like thanked the dude. But I just would rather suffer like the music than have like
your ears fucking hurting.
Yeah, like in like such additional physical pain, like another kind of pain. I was like, nah. But L'Enfant Sauvage, just a good album. Everything that they did prior to this, more streamlined, less chaos, less riffage that was like hard to discern. Everything was very catchy on this album. Great melody. They're very known for their pull-off tapping stuff, in my opinion. Yep. And like watching them play, like on a YouTube playthrough, it's like, wow, they are extra simple. But it doesn't sound that way when you listen to it.
It doesn't sound simple.
It doesn't sound that simple. Like they'll just play an open riff, but because of the pattern of it, because of the drum work behind it, because of the additional guitar over top of the quote unquote easy rhythm, it's just a very unique band. I think they almost springboard off of like Meshuggah's catalog in a way, whereas Meshuggah's like kind of gent. Gojira is almost like a branch off of that. They're not like that, like compressed gent sound where there's like no sustain, but they kind of move from that to where they utilize that pull off tapping lead section a lot, and it just really works for them. It's something different from Meshuggah because they kind of do those like ambient bends and loud long noises for their guitar solos, but Gojira writes these tapping rhythms, and like they just stand out in your brain for days afterwards. And even the songs that they played the shit out of on the radio, like Sirius Satellite and whatever other means I was hearing Gojira from, where some of those songs are almost like played out for me. I can still enjoy them, but the reason I put this album on the list here because I think it's Pete Gojira. There's not a bad track on there. I like the deep cuts on there. I think Born in Winter is one. I love it because it's got a clean guitar rhythm, but it also utilizes that pull-off kind of method. Yeah. And it's clean. And I'm like, oh, man, these guys can do that on an acoustic guitar even. So everything on here is good. The Axe, Mouth of Kala, The Gift of Guilt, just nothing but bangers on there. The songs that weren't getting the radio. So the radio love was like Explosia, the title track, L'Enfant Sauvage, and yeah, probably those two got like the most. Maybe the Axe even got some airplay, but every single one of these songs is a banger to me. And I think if people wanted to know, like, hey, Nick, what Gojira album should I buy? I would say that one. Yeah. Even though my introduction was the two prior to that, I like kind of grew with them. And I went back and I got Terra Incognita and God help me, I forget
the link.
Thank you. And those are very genty, like that's why I say they kind of piggybacked off that Meshuggah Gent style.
Yeah.
Because they had to grow a little bit in their songwriting, and they really did when you get to From Mars to Sirius, which I believe is their third album.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got, The Way of All Flesh, which is, I'm told, like a case study in production. I feel like it's got so many good songs on it, and be that as it may, it's got a couple of filler tracks, in my opinion. I would skip a couple of those. I go back to them and maybe still enjoy them, but when you get to this one, I don't skip a track on it.
Yeah.
I just let it roll all the way through, and there's a lot of catchiness to it. The Way of All Flesh, I thought, was the greatest thing I'd ever heard since From Mars to Sirius. I just thought it was better. It's just a better album, better songs, and I like both of those albums a lot. Can't say enough good about them, but this is the one for me I would start with if you're a new fan. L'Enfant Sauvage. I love saying it. L'Enfant Sauvage. I feel French when I say it. But great band. I know you've grown to appreciate them over time. I think I want to see them get back to this and the previous two albums.
Yeah.
Prior to L'Enfant Sauvage, because Magma and was it
Fortitude?
I wanted to say Frontier. Fortitude, not bad, not great.
Yeah,
and that's where
I thought Fortitude was better than Magma.
Yeah,
I thought Magma was like I was riding the wave from this.
Mhm.
So for me, Gojira, you showed them to me a long time ago, and you're like,
Mhm.
I don't know if you like this because they don't grind. I'm like, well, that's not everything I
Little
base my
Little
taste
bit.
off. But you're like, this is heavy, and I listened to it, and in a roundabout way. Then somehow I got The Way of All Flesh. I think I ordered it offline, and then I was like, okay, now I see what Nick's talking about. This
Yeah.
band fucking rules. And
Yeah.
then of course, then I go back to their older catalog. And then by that time, by 2012, because there was quite the, fucking 4 years between they put out The Way of All Flesh and
L'Enfant Sauvage.
yeah. So, it's not a huge time stamp, but if you're getting into a band, there's a lot you can explore in 4 years before they come
Yeah.
out with one. So I was fully on board when this came out.
Yeah.
Right on top of it. I believe I own it too. I went because I was buying CDs at that time. Still around 2012 was when I would put shit into the CD player, And I feel the same way as you about the album. It from front to back, it's a fucking banger. I think The Way of All Flesh is like that for me too.
Yeah.
But this is a maturation, tone wise, production wise. Like you said, The Way of All Flesh, great production, case study in production. But this is just like that in 2012 with their songwriting, with the vocals, with their drum work, And then, unfortunately, I was so high on them when Magma came out. I was just like, oh man, I need the nuts.
Yeah.
And there's no nuts here.
Yeah. Maybe the Cell. There's maybe two heavy tracks on there that I would appreciate, but other than that, I'm kind of like, wow, they really slowed down. With respect to this album, I was so high on The Way of All Flesh that I did not immediately run out and buy this album. I was getting a lot of it through like the internet, and I was just hearing plenty of it. I did not run right out and buy it on day one. I might have waited a full calendar year before I went out and got it.
Oh no shit.
Because I just was into what they were doing, and again, it's not the first time I've done this with a band where I really love a band. I get anxious about their new material, and for good reason. You're gonna get a doozy maybe, and I don't want the experience to be ruined for me.
Yeah.
But I found myself really enjoying the songs that I was hearing enough to where I was like, okay, I should probably buy this album. And also, I'm not for nothing. Like I was probably a broke mofo back in the day. I wasn't just running out and buying albums. These days, I don't mind like taking a chance on an album. Like I'm not exactly worried about paying rent like I once was.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's like my needs are kind of met. I don't buy every single album under the sun, but if they put out a new album in the next year or two, I'll probably buy it on day one.
Yeah.
And just let it be what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to see Gojira get heavier than they have been. Fortitude had some good songs on it, but and it was a very experimental album, I think too. And maybe even better than Magma End of Day. But those last two albums get next to no repeat plays in my household, in my life. And I may, just based on saying that, I might revisit them. But I could listen to this every day for the rest of my life.
Right.
That's why I'm talking about it today.
Right.
And I can listen to the previous two as well. I just feel like they hit peak stride songwriting, production, lyrical content. That's another thing I didn't even talked about yet. Like, their lyrical content to me is meaningful. They go from speaking to the environment and taking care of, Mother Nature and planet Earth to like the esoteric, spiritual, existential, self-reflection type lyrics. Like, they're both in there. And it's kind of weird to be singing about the ocean 1 minute and the whales to like your life in hindsight and like your soul moving on out of your body. But they do both things very well for me. I really like that they can check both of those boxes. They can make me care about the planet that I live on and care about myself and my spiritual nature. So I think Gojira, L'Enfant Sauvage, perfect album for me, best in their catalog, and that's saying a lot because they've got some great work in there.
Oh yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. This is a great album. Also for me, I did get to see them live myself, and they were one of the better bands still to this day that I've seen live, how tight they were, what they did on stage. And I do just want to touch on your point just real quick before we move on to our final album. You had mentioned like they kind of pulled from Meshuggah a little bit. Well, I think a lot of that is just how tight they are, because when you're playing that gent in Meshuggah, you have to be a tight ass band. Your right hand has to keep up with that kick drum, and I think that's where some of that leans for Gojira in there, is because that right hand is tight with that kick drum, and they're so tight like that where you could almost be like, this is a little genty, but it to me it's not. It's more metal, like heavy metal, than it is like gent, where gent's almost its own genre with the low super tuned guitars and the low all that kind of stuff, like they kind of get into a little bit of the bendy stuff or whatever, but they play 6 strings, don't they?
Yeah.
Yep. So like they're not into the 7-8 strings, trying to be as low as they can and just like the Morse code on the fucking kick drum guitar, you know. But I see where you're coming from for that though, because they do have those elements of just that right hand and kick drum tightness. So, but yeah, fucking hell, Gojira, and I think most people say that as well.
Yeah, I would run out and see them anytime I could. For whatever reason, like schedules, like their tour dates drop on days that I just cannot make it. Like I couldn't make it to the one that you went to. I wanted to. Something came up. I don't know if it was work or otherwise.
You had to work because you were on third shift.
I should have quit my fucking job for that. It would have been. Still would have been fine.
I still owe you a concert, so
one of these days, bro. One of these days.
One of these days we'll get to one, man.
Man, so. I need to see them again.
I wanted to take you to the aborted one, but we were playing. Fucking
I mean, despite my critical opinion of the last 2 albums, I would run out and see them tomorrow.
Oh
if
yeah,
I knew
me too.
It was.
Me too,
if I knew it was on, if it was even an option for me, I would run out and see them tomorrow. I can't believe it's been so long. God, it was like 2009 when I saw them. It's been 15.
That's a lifetime
fucking
ago,
years,
buddy.
man. Yeah, it was that was literally a lifetime ago. So,
all right. Well, here's my last album. It came out on November 14th, 2006.
Okay.
And this album is for Impact, The Faceless, Akeldama. I looked up how to say it the other day and I forgot, but Akeldama. Akeldama, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah. I know it's like a place somewhere. It's a field of blood.
Okay.
In Aramaic. So this album, I remember hearing this album, and it was at the time like kind of early Infinite Design days when technicality and heaviness was so important to my life. And I just remember listening to this and I was just like, all right, we've peaked. This is as good as it fucking gets right here.
Peak musicianship.
This is as good as it gets. There's a little wonkiness to it, but there's some good songwriting in there, but it's not so wonky, like out of left field where like almost, I don't want to say wonky when I say BTBAM, but like it's not so riff soup like that. There's like parts that repeat, but it was like death metal. It was in your face.
Yeah.
You know, it just really spoke to me in every facet. It was all the death metal that I wanted at that time. I know there's a weird scattered history around Michael Keane and the band and keeping members. Even on this, the drummer played like 4 songs, and then there was like they broke in the recording process, and then they had like 4 other drummers play on the album because I remember Lord Marco played on a track or 2 or something on it. So it was like a very mixed, it's always been up or down with this band, mostly down. And even from this album, I could take or leave anything after this. Like, I'm good on anything after this album. Now, I can listen to Planetary, but it's just not this album. I can listen to like the newer one that they just came out with.
And Becoming a Ghost.
Yeah, like I fuck with that album. I think it's great.
Yeah.
But it's still not this album.
Yeah.
And it just on impact alone and what it did to me and how it changed even the way I started playing guitar and writing, I'm like, this is man, if you're a guitar and you produce shit really well, which Michael Keane does, like it instantly makes me become a fan of being a producer and guitar player because I'm already like, okay, your league's ahead of me in both categories, so I only can give you your flowers and look up to you. But man, this just had the best songs to me. It's one I'll still listen to. Other than that, after that, they were like my favorite band on this. I was showing it to everybody. I was like, you got to hear this. Then after when Planetary came out, which is one that I've come to find out that most people actually like better, not for me. This is the album, and after that, it's whatever for me after that. But yeah, the Faceless, Acadalma, whatever, however you fucking say it. Like I said, I figured it out the other day. But
when this drops, I'm hoping for someone to get on the comment section and school us on it.
Yeah, I looked it up Google on how to say it the other day.
Akeldama. Yeah. I mean, if we're just being phonetic about it, yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. Akeldama.
Yeah.
I would always be like, yeah, the first Faceless.
Yeah, fair.
That's what I say. Because I could never really pronounce it. But if you listen to the show for any period of time, pronunciation isn't my strong suit.
That's all right.
But yeah.
We're only here.
So that's my pick right there, man. That's my 5th one. But, that was the longest one. As far as order goes, that came out in 2006. Of course, I got plenty of albums after this and in between, and I'm going to start my list for the 3rd part of this episode that we'll do, or the 3rd part of this series that we'll do, I'm sure, after this, but them are just the first 5 that came to mind, man.
Yeah, I mean, when over the last 2 days, I was just kind of combing through my CD collection, so we're just speaking to like our personal collection, basically. I mean, there's all kinds of great metal albums that we don't own, I'm sure, or would love to listen to some more and will speak to in the future. But for me, another band that you showed me, it took me some... Faceless is one that you showed me, and I like some of their other work. I'm not even as familiar with their first album because I kind of caught on with Planetary. And I moved forward with them and have appreciated them since then. And this other band that you showed me, it took me a few listens and a few trips from here to Grand Haven to like really get it, but it's Cattle Decapitation. Now, you had shown me, I think it's pronounced Anthropocene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anthropocene Extinction.
Yeah, Anthropocene Extinction. Oh, man. So great album. It took me a minute to like move past some of the grind and the blast to like when they start hitting that like kind of like up tempo groove.
Yeah.
Like it's groove, but it's fast. And I started to really fuck with that album, and I bought my own copy of it, listened to it plenty, and I thought, man, these guys are such great musicians. Fast forward a couple of years to Death Atlas, and that's the album that I think is, I mean, even the new one.
Yeah, Terracite.
Just fucking maybe
so
just great work by these guys. I think Cattle Decapitation just gets better.
Yeah.
Every album. I don't think they haven't regressed in any way, in my opinion. The reason it's Death Atlas today is because Terracite is just too new to go down in the annals of history as one of the greatest metal albums of all time. I mean, probably 2 or 3 from last year's top 10 for us could have been on this list for me, just because they're so recent in my mind. But when I'm looking at like the pantheon of extreme metal, Death Atlas to me was just such a banger. I remember having it playing at work. I was at Structural Concepts, and I was building some easy fucking cases. They had me on a line in Plant 2, and I was just like, you guys make cases this easy? Over there we struggle at Plant 1. We're dying over there, and you guys got these like Legos that you're putting together over here. Yeah, and I was like, this is fucking dumb. And I remember just being able to like really like let the music rip over there because I was by myself at a station and nobody around to hear me, and I could basically walk the whole case up and down the line and just listen to my music. But Death Atlas was an album that I remember like just stopping what I was doing and going, fucking for real right now with this shit. Like, this is, oh my God, this is the heaviest shit I've ever heard. And another album where I'm going to say it again and sound like a broken record, but not a bad song on it.
Nope.
Just straight fire from start to finish. Travis Ryan's vocals, he really hit that. He's always had that goblin vocal that's just like unique unto all extreme metal vocalists, but utilized so well on this album. And I just like the grooves and just the crushing heaviness. And sometimes I think with the prior album, and they have previous work to that even, but like there's a lot of grind and blast, and it's a little bit hard for me to digest all of that. But with Death Atlas, I just felt like there was so much groove and heavy on there that, you know, I think I would recommend that to people who, similar to me, are not going to be able to listen to too much grind and blast. I don't mind it. I just think that it has to be like a very small part of your songwriting and a very small part of your overall repertoire that you're bringing to the fans, because it's fine, it works, especially if you like already have a good riff going and then you progress it into that grind or blast beat, like then that makes it really effective. But when the song starts like that, for me, I'm kind of like, what's happening right now? And I don't think they really do that to you very often. And I think that if we're going to talk about great metal albums and great metal bands, especially on this show, we're both very huge Cattle Decapitation fans. It took me a long time to get into them. I knew about them prior to you showing them. I knew they were a band, very popular name, and by name alone, kind of hard to like take in. It's like a Rotting Christ. You're like,
or a Cannibal Corpse.
Yep, hard
like
to sit around
familiar, and you're kind of like, that's a lot. Like,
it's hard to sit around the water cooler and talk about Cattle Decapitation. You know, it's just kind of unsettling. But at the end of the day, I love it. I just had to like move past the band name and not be like, come on, dude, quit being a baby. Like, it's extreme metal. Like, and I think Travis Ryan's a vegetarian or a vegan.
They are. Yep.
Yeah, so it makes sense. They like will poke fun at like the meat industry and make it a part of their entire existence, their art, their being, and just put it on paper, put it into their songs and their lyrical content, and how we basically like destroying ourselves and the planet for the sake of industrialized meat production, but and thus the band name and thus the gratuitous artwork as well. But I love this album. Terrorcyte goes up there, Anthropocene Extinction goes up there, but I think if I was to tell somebody start, you know, with Death Atlas, I think that would be a good place for anybody to pick up the Cattle Decap catalog, I mean, and move with it.
So you can go all the way back to like Serve Man 2002, a very raw death metal band. Like they were, you know, each band starts its own adventure somewhere, and you really have to be a fan of raw death metal to get into to Serve Man or Human Manure or some of them early ones. And then when you get into like 2012, the Monolith of Inhumanity, that's when they start kicking it up a notch. I believe I believe around that time is when they got the drummer that they have now. I think his name is Dave or something. And then that's when the band really moves into this other category of fucking heavy and in your face and technical and all those things. So I can't say enough good things about Death Atlas either. It's kind of funny that it came out in November 29, 2019, and they have a song called Bring Back the Plague. So when then the fucking pandemic came in 2020, and then they had the video for Bring Back the Plague. But if you want to know what the soundtrack to the end of the world is, fucking put on Death Atlas, because it literally is so dark.
Yes.
It is in your fucking face. Like, just this cloud comes over you when you're listening to this thing. It's just so punishing and brutal and heavy and everything that you would want out of a fucking metalhead. Yeah, this is what you want, is Death Atlas. It's just, like I said, it's the soundtrack to the end of the world to me. It's fucking amazing though too at the same time. Like, nothing bad about that, but like if a nuclear bomb was going off, I'd probably just put that on and fucking sit here until it was time to be done, because that is the fucking soundtrack. Then I mean, Terrorcyte's fucking great too.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we're just
I like all their shit, especially going back, you know, and go all the way back to like Human or Karma, Bloody Karma. And, you know, I like what they stand for. You know, I'm not a vegan or vegetarian. I love meat and I'll fucking eat whatever. But they are concerned, almost like the Gojira thing, the human impact on the environment, ethics of eating meat and animal rights.
Yeah.
You know, and he said they're vegetarian. They're not hardline vegan because there's, you know, parts of them where, you know, they're probably not going to eat fucking Taco Bell or anything. But, you know, he's like, they are vegan, so, or vegetarian, excuse me.
Yeah, and this is, again, another album where I was so high on Anthropocene Extinction that I didn't run right out and get this on day one. I think I had to kind of like, let me make sure I like this. Let me make sure that they're still writing music that I can fuck with. And I don't know why I wouldn't have I think the only reason I wouldn't have liked it is if it was just like way too much grind or blast on it for me to appreciate. But I do believe, it says right here on their wiki, band's first album to feature a second guitarist, Belisario DiMuzio, and they got a new bassist on this album as well. So just the fact that they went out and they changed their format a little bit to go from a 4-piece to a 5-piece had my interest peaked. I remember putting it on YouTube at work, listening to it, and I thought, I mean, for me to be completely pulled away from my work and my tools to just sit there and make sure I was hearing what I was hearing and I wasn't just making shit up in my head was a testament to how good this album was. Like, I had to run out and get it immediately. So I knew it had been out for some time because, you know, November 2019, it wasn't much longer before that pandemic rolled around, right? Like March of 2020 is when everything shut down.
Yeah, but they were talking about it basically in December.
Yep. So
people were starting to get sick and shit.
Yep. So I remember like listening to it, and then the Bring Back the Plague track, it being just like so just prophetic that I went out and I purchased this album sometime later and definitely enjoyed it during the pandemic, thinking like, oh, if it's going down, it's going down with Death Atlas. I mean, it seemed like it would be the last album that we would get from anybody ever. But produced by Dave Otero, which is a name that we are familiar with on this show, out in Denver's Flatline Audio, which is where Sean and Cavalcade recorded before the name change of the studio. But just a great album, and I think that an all-timer. This is what we're here to talk about today. Some all-time great albums. Like these albums that I talked about today, in my opinion, not a bad track on them.
Nope.
Not a bad track. Some of them are a little bit longer. I think all of these are like over an hour long, so definitely have like an hour-long activity to do, or just be that kind of person like me where you can sit in a room and put the headphones on and listen to it and come away inspired. So Jay, I will take the liberty to run down my entire list for the audience one more time in full.
Okay, let's do it.
So I started out with Lamb of God, Ashes of the Wake. We got Between the Buried and Me, The Silent Circus. Meshuggah with Nothing. Gojira, L'Enfant Sauvage. And Cattle Decapitation, Death Atlas. Those are another set of 5 of my all-time greatest metal albums.
All right, so I'll repeat the same. Killswitch Engage, Alive or Just Breathing. Into Eternity, Buried in Oblivion. Glass Casket, We Are Gathered Here Today. Between the Buried and Me, Alaska. That's 2 BTBAMs. So we didn't pick the same one, but, you know.
Good for us.
And then The Faceless, Akadema.
Yeah, the
Akadema.
AKA the first Faceless album.
Yeah. The first Faceless, and like it goes through 2006 for me. So we'd probably do another episode like this because we got plenty more albums to talk about. But hopefully, if you guys haven't heard one of these albums or are interested, we gave you enough to want to actually go listen to it, or even ourselves go back and listen to some of these albums. Like I said, I love these conversations, just these open conversations about music, because it makes me go back and remember some of the stuff that I love listening to. And with that being said, you got anything else to add, Nick?
No, I mean, I'm sure we'll bring 5 more albums.
Yep.
I mean, I got a Faceless album that I brought with me today. I just made the determining decision this morning to like go with these 5. I felt like I wanted to speak to 5 names that were maybe a little bit more popular, just for the sake of like audience being able to identify with, like, not my favorite back pocket band, but something that, I'm familiar with that band name, or that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, if we're going to be talking about all-time great albums, like, I don't want to pick, like, the most obscure album just yet. I brought a few of those, but I thought, we'll get there. That is a masterpiece of an album in my bag there. I've got several that I brought with me, but today, these are the 5. Definitely geeked on doing another one of these albums. Maybe this year or maybe after the year, but because I know we're going to do albums of the year, at some point, and we're only halfway through the year, and I almost feel like I've got my 10 albums picked already, and we got 6 months of releases to go. But yeah, man, let's do this again sometime, and maybe even have a guest.
Okay,
maybe we'll talk about it off camera.
Sounds good.
We'll arm wrestle.
All right. All right. With that being said, y'all, keep it metal. Peace.
Later.
Thank you so much for checking out the episode. Be sure to hit that like button and give us a share.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed our podcast today, please give it a rating on your streaming service to help us gain some exposure.
And if you really enjoyed the show, please give us a follow or hit that subscribe button and come hang out with us every week. And remember, keep it metal.